Right, we're on. Yes, people, welcome back to Process. Today we're joined by yet another guest. We've got Mr. Craig Musham, one of my old S&C coaches from Newcastle United, working with the Newcastle United Under-18 Academy at the minute. Welcome to the podcast, mate.
Cheers, Brendan. Thanks for having us.
No, it's nice to we'll have a nice little catch up before the podcast started, because it's been probably like 2.5, nearly 3 years since I last probably seen you and talk. So it's nice to kind of have a familiar face on the podcast.
No, it's good to see you again. Like, we've been chatting about like players come in and then all of a sudden one day they're not there, and you kind of like you lose touch and you don't get to see them, and you've known them. Like, I was knowing you like 6 or 7 years, and all of a sudden you're not there. It's crazy when you think about it.
Yeah,
it's not massively dissimilar to school when you leave and you miss everyone.
Yeah, I know.
Just what I've been there. So yeah, my official role title is a lead academy strength and conditioning coach. So I'll work mainly with the under-23s and under-18s at Newcastle Academy. I'll assist or oversee the 9s to 16s program. I work with James Newton on that. Currently furloughed. It's probably since a lot of people are. So I've had a lot of spare time on my hands and pretty much just been a full-time father, which is definitely harder than my actual job, but absolutely loving every minute of it. I
was going to say, you've got another one on the way as well, so you're probably a very, very busy man. So give me a few years until that. But you briefly touched upon it. Like, football's a crazy industry where we mentioned it right at the start that there's lads that probably come through the system you are working with for years and years and years, and then one day they're released, and then that's kind of it that you hear from them. Like, I can kind of compare it to like in a business where if you kind of get sacked or the boss like pays you off or whatever, he's not going to come and check up on you kind of every so often. He's kind of like, you might bump into each other down the line, but he's not going to be kind of, oh mate, how you doing? Which is why football's such a tough industry, and it's probably hard for yourself kind of building relationships over lads that you've like, obviously you've been at the club for a long time. I probably was about 12 or 13 maybe when you came in, and then obviously I left at 21. Building that relationship and then someone going, it's probably tough for you mentally. And then obviously we've caught up now and we're kind of just clicking it off straight away and chatting away. Like, we had a good little conversation beforehand, but we'll bring up some topics that we just discussed beforehand. But to start off, just want to find a little bit about yourself in terms of how you got into the role you're at, maybe starting back out at school. Did you play sport at a certain level, and then kind of how did it progress from college, university, and to the point you're at today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was probably like most kids in the northeast of England. I wanted to be a footballer, so played football when I was younger. Played a lot of other sports, but football was the main serious one. Had a couple of trials at different clubs, didn't quite get on. One of them reasons somebody brought was I wasn't fast enough. And to me, I think this was when I was 16. Being fast meant like being like Usain Bolt, like a 100-meter sprinter. But in football, you don't need to be a 100-meter sprinter. Most sprints are, less than 30 meters. But nobody ever sat down to us and explained that to us. So that was probably some of the underlying passion or reason why I became a sports scientist, strength and conditioning coach. So got to 16, stayed on at school, did sport there, continued paid A-level. Got the end of there. The only real route I saw was to go to university. So I went to university, did sports science. While I was there, I got injured. And someone probably touch on quite a bit. While I was injured, I decided to do a coaching badge. So I did my FA level 1. And from there, I really enjoyed the coaching side of things. So I thought, I'll go on to do my FA level 2. And at the same time, I was going to a gym at Blade Rugby Club. And the manager there offered us a job. So 2 nights a week while I was doing a university degree, I was learning to become a fitness instructor. So that was kind of like my first forte into, the gym side of things. And again, quite enjoyed that from a point of view of learning the basics of a gym. What I didn't really enjoy was being a receptionist or a glorified cleaner, as I'm sure anybody who's been a gym instructor will know. When you're not working with clients, you're tidying everything up. I think it was like my second year of my sports science degree. I had a lecturer called Duncan French, who was an S&C coach. He was the first person who really brought up this idea of strength and conditioning, or this job. And straight away, that was something that twig with sports science is quite like a wide field. You can do a lot of different things in it, where strength and conditioning is a little bit more specialised to one area. So as I was going through, I finished my degree, was working as a gym instructor. Didn't feel like I wouldn't have gotten a full-time job at that time point. Most jobs now are looking at a master's degree minimum. So I planned to have a year out, go and do a master's degree. And in that year out, I was looking to get some experience from a performance side. So I emailed Newcastle United, the Falcons, Eagles, anywhere in the Northeast that was S&C based or performance based. Got an email back from Newcastle United saying there was an internship. Went there for a year. So for that year in between, I was working as a gym instructor, I was coaching football, and I was interning at Newcastle for a year, and it was great experience. And the second year, I started my master's degree at Edinburgh, doing strength and conditioning. Again, getting loads of experience, getting more knowledge, improving my skill set as an S&C coach or a sports scientist, if you like, at that time. And then it just timed absolutely perfectly that I come to the end of my master's degree, that the APPP come in, so the Elite Player Performance Pathway, and where clubs are starting to recruit more staff. And it just happened to be Newcastle asked me to come in for an interview for the 9s to 16s position. Lucky enough, went in and got it, and they've never been able to get rid of me since. And since then, I went from 9s to 16s to 18s, and then at the start of last year, I became the S&C coach in the academy. So it's right place, right time.
Yeah, I know. I think though, like you touched on it there about how you were doing loads of different jobs. I think like you do create your own luck in that sort of sense, like being in the right place at the right time. You obviously put the hours in doing your job at Blade and doing your master's degree, and then also doing the internship at the same time. You're putting yourself in the scenarios where things are going to happen, which I think a lot of people probably don't do, especially in the fitness community or the fitness space, S&C space, where it is very, very kind of saturated. There's a lot of people who want to do it because it's not a bad job to have, and a lot of people have an interest in fitness and S&C and stuff. So it is hard to get into it, but I think just surround yourself with people in that industry, or maybe just, you have to do a lot of things for free. So I'm guessing the internship was pretty much free, and you kind of have to put yourself in these places unpaid, probably doing like nearly full-time hours for less than minimum wage, or probably free, just to get yourself into that industry, which I think a lot of people find they probably don't actually realize. And then you touched up upon being the fitness instructor, sweeping the floors and the treadmills. I've been doing that quite a bit. I found that a complete different ball game. Obviously, coming out of professional football, my first 8-hour shift, which I touched on before the podcast, having to go around and clean treadmills with dust on. And I was thinking, 2 years ago, I was warming up at St. James's Park, ready for against Man City. Edison was kicking balls at the other end of the pitch, and now I'm here dusting treadmills and stuff. But it's the reality of kind of what you do have to kind of go through those times where you're working a lot of hours, maybe doing the crappy jobs, quote unquote. But just to get to that point and obviously gain more experience, and you've put yourself in the right position and obviously progressed and stuff. So did you say that you went to uni and studied sports science, and then the S&C was a master's?
Yeah, so I did sports science with coaching at Northumbria is my undergraduate degree. So coaching is always something I think I always knew I kind of want to get into in some aspect. And I'd still say, as I am coaching as a strength and conditioning coach. Then, like I say, sport, it was quite wide. So we did biomechanics, physiology, psychology. I just felt like that was probably too broad, and I was quite interested more in the physiology side of things and more on the strength and conditioning side of things. So I'd look around at the time. I think there was only really Edinburgh and St. Mary's. Maybe there's one other one that did it in the UK. And Edinburgh course had really good reviews and markups. So I was lucky enough to be able to afford to go and do that. And you touched on it before. Sometimes it's like war of attrition. Who can last the longest not being paid? I probably couldn't have stayed at Newcastle another year and done what I did for free. I would have probably had to go and get a job somewhere. But I think on the flip of that is, I think you've hit on the nail on the head a little bit, in that you've got to, in these situations, show your worth to the person you're working for. So I always talk to people about your currency. So if you're doing a job, why would that person want to keep you on? Well, you've got to be able to show them that you've got value and you're adding value to that program. So I sometimes think back to the gym instructor, and I was bored of just sweeping the floors and washing the machines. I should have been actively trying to get clients to work with, and not even to get paid more, just to be able to show someone, look, I've worked with X, Y, and Z. These were the goals. This was the program I put in place, and this then what happened after 6 weeks. Mm-hmm. And if I go to an interview and I've got that and say, look, yeah, I haven't got experience with you, but these people, then I can sort of say, well, actually, this is their quality as a coach. And I think sometimes people think, like, I could have been at Newcastle for 2 years and I just made protein shakes.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure I was actually adding value to the program. I was thinking of new ideas and adding stuff. Always give a great example, John Fitzpatrick. John came in and he just took over the GPS. Like, it got to the end where it was like, we can't lose him, we need him. And I think if you're trying to get into any role and you first get a foot in the door because you're going in for free, get to that point where the person you're working for cannot afford to lose you. And I think John's probably the great example and the one I bring up to like aspiring coaches all the time. Like, we just couldn't afford to lose him. Mm-hmm. Now we can't get rid of him. But
yeah, I was going to say, when John came in, I didn't realise he wasn't getting paid. He was there for that long. I was like, surely he's getting paid. And someone told me, like, oh, John just got a job. I was like, did you not already have a job? Like, I thought he was there for that long. I was like, it's crazy, but like, that's a perfect example. Like, doing things kind of unpaid and kind of showing willingness to kind of learn, and obviously then providing that much of a good service that someone can't say no to you, kind of thing. And it's like the first thing that when you go into a job interview, the first thing that people ask is, what's your experience, sort of thing. And if you don't have anything because you didn't want to do anything for free, then they're going to look and thinking like, well, you've got no experience. I'm going to pick this guy who done, it might have been like 30 hours a week unpaid for 2 years. Like, this guy's got the experience. I done a podcast with, he's from around my area, he's an S&C coach based in rugby called Callum Fell. He's only a young lad, but he said, like, it's even so hard for him to get a job now. He's got so much experience. He's got 2 years doing, I think he said, about maybe 40 hours a week, like doing S&C, doing PT, working with part-time rugby teams and stuff. And he still didn't get this job for, I can't remember who it was. I think it was a rugby team down south, but he still didn't get this job. And he's thinking to himself, like, how much experience do you actually need? So that obviously the market in the S&C world is like, it's getting more and more saturated, and the kind of standards getting set higher and higher to get a job. It's crazy.
There's two things on it there for me. It's like, yeah, you can do it for free, but think of ways you can get paid for it. So, like, what we're doing as a PT, getting individual clients in and getting them to pay, like, you're learning and you're getting paid. Mm-hmm. So don't always necessarily give it away for free. And I think the second one is, when you're getting it away for free, you're networking. Yeah. So myself, John, and James were all interns. Mm-hmm. So when positions became available, the people who put that job out there knew who we were. They knew who we were as people. They'd seen we in the good times and the bad times. I think they say, like, jobs for the boys. And I can kind of understand why it is sometimes, because you know that person, or if you know somebody who knows them. So I'll get people ringing up and saying, look, this person's put an application in. They say they know you, what like feedback can you give on them? And I think that's massive, because you spend more time with the people at work than you probably do with your wife and family or your kids or your partner at home. You want to have a good working relationship. Yes, you can work with people who you like, but it's a hell of a lot more fun if you get on with them. Uh-huh. And I think if you spend 5 minutes in our office now, you'd walk in, you think, are these just best mates who just come in here, just have a bit of crack? Because we get on, but we get on because we spend time, like, building those relationships. And I think that's a massive thing. And that comes, talking about building relationships, is networking. Mm-hmm. So knowing different people and them knowing you, especially. Because if we put out for James's job, I think we've got like 75 applicants. Yeah. And like, to go through 75 CVs is quite difficult, especially when you don't know them and they've all got similar qualifications. Mm-hmm. And it come down to, with James, was we knew we could build relationships with coaches, and the coaches liked them and got on with them. And for us, that's a massive hurdle in the role. Forget about, like, your technical knowledge to begin with. It's like, can you actually build something with somebody from then to build a solid foundation to actually do some positive work? Because if you're just going to butt heads with people all the time, like, you're not really going to get anywhere. And at the end of the day, the players are the ones who are going to suffer, and that's what we're there for.
No, that's a great point about having that relationship. Like, you want, especially in a football club, it's a team environment, you want almost it all to be a community. You don't want, like, that's that S&C goes, I don't want to talk to him because he looks miserable and horrible. Like, you want that kind of community. Or, like, you can go chat to, I don't know, the S&C coach about this, you can go and chat to the physio about that kind of thing. You do want that. And especially within football, you need to be able to have a bit of banter with someone. If you're not in with that, one, you're going to get absolutely battered for it, or two, you're not going to get, nobody's going to talk to you, and you're just going to feel like left out. Like you need that kind of ability to actually communicate, and also with the players as well. If you can get their buy-in, like you might not be. I think personally for myself, I'd rather have someone who doesn't yap on about velocity and this, that, and the other, and all these numbers on a computer and stuff like that. I'd rather have someone who can put a decent session on, but you can make the sessions, like you can get the players buy-in, and for me to actually have a bit of crack with someone. And I knew that's what I wanted when I was a player. Obviously, I wanted to get fitter, I wanted to get stronger. I put the work in, but I also wanted someone that I could have a bit of crack with, like in between sets or after the workout or whatever.
No, absolutely. I think
I hated you because you're boring, but well, I'm joking. No, crazy, great. You, John, everybody was top quality, to be fair, when I was there.
Well, that's the type of stuff will come in. They'll come in and say, "Oh, fucking same program again."
Yeah.
Like you didn't know the person, you would take it personally, but you know they're just having a bit of crack with you, and that's like sort of reading people and not taking it too seriously. And I think that's something I probably did right at the beginning of my career. I took everything really, really seriously, and now it's a bit like just relax. Like we'll get the work done, we'll have a laugh, we'll make sure it's good quality, and we'll go from there. Yeah. I think when you're talking about like Fraser Bell in the physios, he always talks about nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And I think he's absolutely spot on, because at the end of the day, it's like 4,000 sports science students graduate every year, might even be more now. So you can argue there's lots of people out there with the technical knowledge. It's like how you actually show real empathy. And I think we were speaking before, like when you work, so this is the first year I've really worked one-to-one with players in an injured setting. Like if you work one-to-one with somebody and you can't really show them empathy, like it becomes a bit awkward and you don't really get that buy-in from the person. Like you have a genuine interest in their health and well-being. And I think that's reciprocating the work and they do for you, because they could just toss it off and say, "Oh, this is rubbish, this," and cause all sorts of problems. But like the program might not be great, and they might turn around and say, "Look, great, can I change this? Can we do that?" And build a relationship, you've bonded and hopefully helped them a little bit.
Yeah. I think Fraser was a good example as well. Fraser was always one who I kind of like warmed to a little bit, because he always showed interest in me when I was out for like a long-term injury. He was great. He always used to send it, like even after when I left the club and stuff, he sent us a little text and stuff and check up how I was. But like that's just getting the players buying in. Like if I seen someone who actually cared about me, and maybe if I even if I said like, "Oh, this afternoon can we do this?" and they'd be like, "All right, yeah, I'll integrate that into what I had planned," sort of thing, then I'd be like, right, spot on. Rather than someone saying, "No, I'm going to do it my way," because I know a lot of players who don't enjoy that sort of the gym aspect sort of thing, and maybe doing the same thing over every single week. And if you can put in something that's going to get their buy-in, like maybe, like for me, I used to love lifting weights. So if I can have a little bit of a body in there or something like that, even if it's just 10 minutes into the session, I'm going to probably buy into it more than rather like, right, I'm going to get you outside running for 2 hours and kill you, and I'm just going to be like, "Oh,
no, you're absolutely spot on, Brendan. You've hit the nail on the head for me there. Like when I first went in, I remember my first day as an intern, and my thoughts would be like, the coaches would be telling the players what to do, and every single player would be doing it exactly as it was said. And it wasn't. Like players have got opinions, and I would say I was an autonomous practitioner, and I like to have choice in my role. Players are exactly the same. They like to have a little bit of choice in saying their program. And when you listen to them, don't get us wrong, like they might suggest some stuff and I think that's a little bit dodge, like can we go more in this direction? But like you said there, if you're showing you're willing to listen to them, they'll listen to you a little bit more. It's a give and take relationship. So I think absolutely spot on with what.
Yeah. I think like the higher up in football or higher up in sport in general that you go, the more you're going to have to kind of be flexible with your approach. Because I know there's a footballer around my area he's playing, I think he's in the championship at the minute, but he came to me and I was like, "Oh, what's your S&C kind of stuff?" And he's like, "Oh, they're trying to get me at the club to do this, that and the other." But I just say, "I've never done that in the past and I've got to this point now, so I'm going to stick to what I've done." Like he doesn't really like lifting weights and stuff. He's physically, he's an athlete. Like you look at him, he's an athlete, but he's like, all I've done is body weight stuff because I don't want to touch a weight because it's just not what I do. And if I was a coach and I look at him, look at his physique, look at what he's doing on the pitch, I'd be like, right, fair play. We'll kind of integrate a little bit what I do, but I wanted to base it around what you kind of have always done and what you enjoy. And especially the higher up, the bigger personalities you have. Like if you try and get like, I don't know, if Cristiano Ronaldo's never back squatted before like a 1 rep max in his life and you tell him to do that, he's probably going to tell you to do one. realistically, like you want to kind of just get the players buy-in, like we've talked about before, and not make them do things that they're going to worry about and two going to want to do. But also the gyms, especially for like high pressurized sport like football, like at the top end of sport in the Premier League and stuff, that gym aspect is probably going to be a little bit of time to like maybe switch off a little bit, kind of have a bit of banter with lads, maybe play like a bit of head tennis for a warm up or something, then do like push each other in the gym and kind of have a bit of banter, like, oh, I got one more rep than you on doing this kind of thing, like, oh, your techniques, like banter each other a bit. That's kind of a time to switch off and team build as well, rather than just like, right, we need to focus, you need to get like 10 reps of 60 kilogram back squat, and if you don't get that, there's a punishment sort of thing. There's got to be that sort of balance rather than the old school approach, I feel.
If you think, you know yourself, on training, you spend like 30 seconds lifting and then you're going to spend 3 minutes recovering.
Yeah.
Say on an average exercise. So you've got 3 minutes and you're not expecting anybody really to stand there and not say anything or do anything. They're gonna start chatting or wandering away. It's like sometimes it's making sure they don't start causing bother.
Yeah.
But like it is, you find like even out on the pitch, if they might have like a little bit of crack in between drills, but generally it'll be about the next drill. They're quite like focused on. Whereas in the gym, I always think sometimes you find like there's a lot of different conversations going on as opposed to it's just constantly about work and football. And like certain days we'll have like Olympic style days where we'll just put 4 or 5 exercises out to them. It'll be like long jump, the vertical jump, and med ball throw. It's just like, right, who can get the furthest, who can jump the highest. It just adds a bit of competition. Honestly, like even the 23s, like I expect them like, oh no, I'm not for this. Like they got so into it. Yeah. Just each next person trying to beat the last person, and that person trying to go back and beat them. Like little things like that, because he's a competitor. That's what he's on. You want to compete, and trying to put that into the program, I think always can always benefit it as long as it's done correctly. Because you don't want them like you're doing back squat and say, oh, well, I'm gonna lift 120 and then the back's about to snap, things like that. So, but it's like tools in your toolbox. Like what can you bring out for what outcome you want.
Yeah, it's like you work with top athletes, and then you said the competitive, like just the kind of like going off track a little bit. But I've got the gym I work at, we do group sort of stuff, and I was thinking, I'm always trying to think of like different things that we can do rather than just do like your standard circuit sort of thing, like that exercises, press ups, that exercise squats, because I get bored of doing that. So I was trying to think like what would I enjoy and what would be like quite fun, but also you'd get the benefit. So what I did was I've got the big gym balls, the big Swiss balls, and put them on like a little, like the I don't know what it is, but like a little block so they would stay still, they wouldn't roll. And I lined like not the mic. I'd lined 4 or 5 up in a row, and that one of the stations was right. Everyone else has got to work, and you two have got to race each other, doing like doggies, like get the big ball, put it back to the start, running at the other one. They were like honestly big kids, like running around with these balls. I've never seen them like run so fast in their life and they're all dripping in sweat. They were knackered, but everyone's like big kids at heart, and we all have that competitive edge. And if you You can find something. Oh, there's somebody on Instagram, I can't remember his name, but he's a strength and conditioning coach. But he literally gets kids to like random stuff, like jump around and like rugby tackle things. And I forgot.
Jeremy Fisher, Jeremy Frisch.
Might be. I'd have to find his name. But I listened to one of his podcasts and followed him. I can't remember his name, but he gets them doing like really random stuff. Yeah. But it's like it's not obviously specific like lifting weights sort of thing, but they're still getting the movement patterns, but in a fun sort of different way. Like it doesn't always have to be like your old school, like you got to do back squat, then you got to do lunges, then you got to do bench press. Like you can mix it up and stuff. And I think some lads will probably buy in more. They'll get more work in, even if it's not like strength specific stuff like you would in the gym environment.
I think you said it there when you said like I'm a bit sick of that. Like if I go into the gym session, I'm thinking bloody hell, this again. Something's gone wrong somewhere along the line. I think it's good to give the players a little break from it, because they're monitoring everything they do. Like they're always being assessed. There's quite like a pressure on them all the time. So sometimes it's good just to bring them in and just put something on that is a little bit more fun. There isn't like, right, you're gonna get marked at the end of it and it's gonna go towards where they get another contract. It's just it's like just a little bit of a break, a little bit of fun, and the players appreciate it, especially if you time it right. So like it used to be when 9s and 16s would be at Christmas, we'd always put more games on because the Christmas break was coming up. Things like that. It's probably a real periodization, really, to keep everything fresh and fun for people.
Yeah, that's what you've got to do, because I know what it is kind of optimal at times to keep everything the same and like tweak little things. But I think with your athletes, they are probably getting a lot of, especially in season, they probably don't need a lot of like gym based stuff. Maybe just keep themselves taken over. So implementing a few little fun things here and there. Like I used to love like group stuff where it was like they got the skiing at Newcastle. We used to do little circuits like skiing, boxing, but then you used to write the times up after it and how far you come. I used to enjoy it because I was quite good at skiing. To be fair, I was quite good at it. That and the rowing and stuff, like little things like that, just mixing it up, especially like talking about injured lads, like doing stuff like that keeps you kind of going, like that little competitive edge, which is what you miss when you're injured. But we'll touch up about injuries and stuff in a bit, but we've probably talked a little bit about there, but kind of your S&C, so quote unquote philosophy. I know a lot of coaches have their own kind of way, but how do you kind of approach it in terms of obviously working with the young lads? Maybe go through your philosophy, how you would kind of program things, especially in season for the young lads, and in terms of testing, what would you do?
So I think in terms of philosophy, so I would use that or describe that as how and why I coach. So probably touch on the why a little bit in terms that you want to help people. It's fundamentally what we're there to do. I think the how for me has probably evolved quite a bit, and I would look at you want to develop an individual's capability, opportunity, motivation to achieve their goal. So if I'm thinking the capability, I'm thinking how is their movement? Do you want them to be better movers? Absolutely. Are they going to get an opportunity to do that? We're going to try and put on enough sessions. So it might be that we only get one session a week, and I'm going to try and get them in before training to get an extra one in. And then probably the big one is motivation, like how we motivate them. You don't always get everybody walking in and think, yeah, I'm ready to do all these exercises. Some people will come in and say, look, I'm feeling a bit tired. What can we change? You know, I've had players before who have actually reduced the amount of exercises they've got, so they've got less to focus on, because they'll complain like, look, I'm tired, I don't concentrate as well, and we're coming issues in the gym session. So they're the three big things in terms of how. And then how it kind of looks for me would be, we developed something called the 5 M's. So mastery, movement, muscle, maximum momentum are 5 stages of our S&C philosophy, and that goes all the way through from 9s to 23s. So if we look at that in terms of mastery, we would base that on predicted adult height. So anybody who's 86% of their predicted adult height and less would be in that mastery phase, which is basically like the 9s, 10s, 11s, and most of the 12s. And it's about having fun, like a little bit what you talked about earlier, about getting the moving patterns. I want to see them fundamental moving patterns, but getting it in games. Because if you try and stop and coach a kid every 2 seconds, they're going to switch off and disappear. We've got hopefully 3 or 4 years with them. We want to build a positive relationship towards S&C. We want them to see it's fun and that we're trying to develop them and help them in a long-term path. And especially that is they're not going to really care too much about sets and reps and things like that.
Yeah.
Move on to movement. So this is for anybody between 86 and 92%. So this is more leading towards structured gym sessions. So here we'll have 5-level exercise continuum, and within that there'll be 9 movement categories. So for instance, you might have squat, and you'll have a specific squat at level 1. When you're technically competent in that, you move to level 2. When you're technically competent in that, you move to level 3. And then we have stage 3, which is muscle. So this is for the guys who are between 92 and 95%. So these are the guys we want now, who should hopefully have technical competency through their fundamental movements. We want to start adding resistance to that. So hopefully through that phase, you'll also get some muscle growth. So ideally, these are the guys who are starting to grow and have their peak growth rates. And then after that, once about 95%, they've still been able to maintain technical competency. We would look at their maximum momentum, which is strength and power. So this is usually where they start coming to me. In terms of them stages, we very lucky to have a force play. So we use force decks. From, I think it's 16s upwards, we do an isometric mid-thigh pull to measure their maximum strength. And then down to 12, we'll do, including up to 23s, we'll do counter movement jumps and drop jumps to measure power. And then from there, I'll develop programs for the 18s and 23s based on their testing score, so it will all be individualized. In terms of any other gym strength testing, every now and then we might do a little bit of upper body, but not massively a lot. What we try and get the players to do is record their gym sessions. So we can get an idea of what a predicted 1RM could be in a back squat and a trap bar deadlift, a split squat, an RDL. Then ideally try and individualize the work they're doing. So in terms of that, we work off 4-week mesocycles. So we usually have like we call them 70, 85, 100 and deload. So ideally we'll be like 1 week behind them. So it's 100% on the pitch. I think it'll be like our deload in the gym. So we don't want to try and smash them in the gym while they're going to get smashed on the pitch. So it's a bit contraindicated. So I think that's pretty much our S&C philosophy in a hat. Like we're saying offline, our 23s now sit within our academy. We want a program where any player from 9 to 23 will sit somewhere on that continuum. So for instance, we had an under 23 signed this year who's never had any S&C background, literally nothing, and they went straight into the sort of like cross of the movement and muscle program where we weren't coming in lifting very heavy. They were just learning how to lift, like never ever done a back squat, never ever done a deadlift, even though like physically, you know, a lot of muscle mass, they look good, but it's just not safe to move on before they're technically competent. So it's something that's worked really well, and we've had that, like that's been refined 100 times in the last, I think, like 5 years. Yeah. It's constantly getting a little bit more added onto it every year, but it's something myself and James and John and Cy Twell, who's the head of sports science at Newcastle and the academy, we're very, very proud of.
No, I like that. I like how you set that out, to be fair. Because the first thing, because obviously I was just there, it probably wasn't really implemented as much when I was there, but it's probably a new sort of thing that's came in. It's nice to hear kind of how you work. Obviously, I'm just kind of there doing it, not really thinking about too much about your kind of processes and stuff. I'm just turning up and just lifting whatever and doing whatever. But it's nice to kind of hear how you work. So what age would you start kind of, I know obviously you talked about the different processes. So in terms of the movement, you talk about percentages. What age would it be roughly when you're in that kind of movement stage? And then when would it progress to the kind of aiming to put on a bit of muscle, increase the resistance and progressive overload in terms of that?
So usually 9s, 10s, 11s, probably the majority of the 12s would be that mastery phase. And then between 12 and 14 would be our movement phase, because that's where we're going to likely see their peak height velocity, so where they're starting to go through puberty. So they would be more about body weight, technical competency. Once they come about a year out their peak height velocity, so we're talking maybe 15 years old, that's when we'll start to look at introducing resistance training in the gym with dumbbells, barbells, anything like that. And then generally when they're about 16, so they're well outside peak height velocity, they'll start doing like maximal strength training, if you want to call it. I think it's like one, maybe it's 2 under 16, so would probably be in that phase. But again, the idea would be is as long as they're meeting them criteria, you could be an under 16 doing a more advanced program than under 23, because it's completely based off you as an individual. And that's what we kind of wanted. We didn't want to say, well, if you're under 12, you're doing this program, you'd see some under 12s look a lot more
bigger than me, probably.
Well, there's 1 or 2 some big guys in the under 12s. But even like 13s, 14s, you start to see them massive changes in size and shape, and it all comes at different times. So we kind of wanted a program that could account for that quite quickly. We found this is something that really helps. So the last thing you want is, you don't want to be testing and then taking forever to write programs. You want to test, assess, and then get a program up as soon as possible. We find that framework's very, very helpful for doing that quickly. Yeah,
good. So what are the kind of, say, like fundamental exercises that you would put in? Obviously, you talked about the different progressions and stuff, but for maybe a young athlete who's obviously the movement and stuff looks pretty decent, what are some of the things that you would focus on in terms of your sessions in season? Maybe because I think if it's the same, I can't remember if it was a Tuesday, because obviously the games are different in the 23s. They're playing on Monday. How many days post game is the kind of the strength session? Or how would you lay out your week in season with obviously the exercises that you involved?
So we work off like match day minus whatever, match day plus. So it used to be like match day plus 2, which would be, say a game was Saturday, that'd be a Monday. We'd do a little bit of gym work in there, or the match day minus 4, which is the Tuesday. So for us, it'll normally fall on a Tuesday afternoon now, which would be match day minus 4. So that's our strength session. So ideally you want it, where the players recovered enough from the last game, but it's also far enough away from the next game that they're not carrying any muscle soreness into that game or any additional fatigue caused by the session. Then we'll have a second session later on in the week, which is always match day -2, which is a power session. So that's where we'll focus on primary exercises or some form of Olympic lifts. Again, where it's lower volume and probably is less strenuous metabolically for them. So that they're not going to be, hopefully, not carrying any muscle soreness going to a game on Saturday or Monday, depending on when the game is. I think the worst thing you can do is you want the players to be fit and fresh for the game. Yes, you want them to develop, but ultimately the most important thing for the player is to play on the game. And if they get to the game and they're sore because your gym session, you lose a little bit, probably trust. And we don't want that. We want them getting to the game and being ready to go and perform and do really well. So I think that works. I think that's worked quite well over the years.
Yeah, I think a lot of young lads probably listen to this because I was probably in the same mentality where I always wanted to keep doing stuff and like push myself. And we'll talk a bit about kind of managing fatigue as a young lad. I was always the one that kind of wanted to do that extra bit in the gym, which I probably wasn't conscious of how I was going to feel on match day. Like I probably overdid it in that sort of sense. And also with the amount of training load that you do, especially as a young lad, because it's another topic of conversation. The young lads, when you come in as an apprenticeship, I feel like you're training more than you are when you're at the first team level. Probably just because your body's you haven't accumulated as many injuries and stuff. When you're first team, it's like train in the morning and then you kind of do a little bit in the afternoon, maybe a little bit of a gym session in the morning. But as a young lad managing obviously gym sessions on top of all that volume, you need to be careful about how much you're doing, because I'm probably a prime example of what overtraining looks like. Obviously doing, like, I used to be out in the morning at like 9:30 straight after breakfast doing some kicking, and then I'd be with the team at 10:30 training, and then in the afternoon I was either after afternoon training or I'd go in the gym. I think over time my body obviously just broke down, and when my legs started to tire so much because of the training load, I started focusing on upper body, which obviously I became quite top heavy. That obviously puts extra stress on the lower part of the body. And like you said before, as a footballer, that you don't really need to touch on upper body massively. Like I think you need some general strength, obviously core mainly, but most of the kind of this power and strength that you want is based around the legs. So touching on fatigue, is the ways that you kind of track players fatigue and manage their kind of load over the course of a season.
Yeah, so John, when he did finally start getting paid off the club, it was to do a PhD, and he looked at dose response training. And one of them things he did begin with was look at the reliability of wellness questionnaires and some monitoring procedures. So from that, players can report wellness scores in the morning, so energy and muscle soreness. I think another one's freshness or sleep quality. Sorry, so we can get that in the morning. And you can give an idea of which players potentially had a rough night's sleep, or they're ready to go and do the toughest session of the week. It allows us to pinpoint individuals and maybe we want to have a conversation with before we start doing any training. And then also a drop jump, so looking at players' change scores in a drop jump to see where they are relative to their norm. So we've used that in the past to identify levels of fatigue. I think in terms of the gym, as I've said, I would plan their week's load based on what the load on the pitch was. If a player came into the gym and said, look, my legs are feeling very heavy, I'm tired, I would ask them to, or we would discuss how we would modify exercise or exercises to assist them. I think when you've built a relationship with certain people, you'll know the ones who have been honest with you and coming to you and asking you and saying, like, look, I am feeling a bit knackered. So I think goalkeeper's a great one. I think a lad now, Jake Turner, he's excellent worker in the gym. If he comes up to us, it's not an issue, because I understand, you know, he's a bit older than the rest of the players. He probably understands his body a bit better, but it's the goalkeeper part. Like, it's completely different, the outfield. Like, the player's hardest day of the week is Saturday. Your easiest day from a physical point of view is probably the Saturday. And we're probably doing everything kind of the wrong way around for you. You should probably have gym sessions closer to games, because you're actually probably going to be able to get away with it. Like, you could probably do a gym session on the Sunday, like your heavy leg session, and it would probably be okay for you, because during the, like, you know, the day before a game, we'll do shooting practice, and that looks like the hardest day for a keeper, you know. So
Especially if you're on your own as a keeper, shooting practices are the worst. Like, it's a cardio. It's
Yeah,
ridiculous.
oh, it
High
looks
intentional
absolutely
interval.
cool. So like if Jake or Dan or Brownie or Will, or Ollie come in and chat, it's like it's already red flags. I know their training week's been a little bit different to what the players has been. So if I'm saying there, oh well, this week they're doing 85% on the pitch. That's geared pretty much to the outfield players, as far as I understand it is. So it's different for the goalies, and it's something I'm probably a little bit more conscious about because it is. I know there's a guy called Anthony White who's a goalkeeping coach at Bournemouth who's also doing a PhD, I think, in goalkeeping. Like, we need that type of research. We've got tons on outfield about what the physical demands of a goalkeeper is always a little bit different. So when a goalkeeper always comes to us in the gym and saying, look, I'm feeling a bit heavy, it's always a little bit of a red flag in that. Weeks look a little bit different to the rest of the squad. So again, it's understanding not just my job as an S&C coach, to understand what they're doing in other areas.
Yeah, I was going to say goalkeeping especially, it's weird because you control kind of the outfield, like fatigue, and also the sessions and the volume and the intensity and stuff, obviously, because you have an input with the coaches about what you're doing in terms of sessions. But goalkeepers, I remember when I was there, we could be training with, like, say, the under 18s, then get a call up, the 23s need a keeper after the session, you've got to do an extra hour. It's like, you can't really put a plan in for keepers. And then even after that, like, the first team might need an extra keeper for some shooting at the end. Like, I remember my days were like, some of my sessions that the lads would be in, have the food, been getting showered and be off home, and I'd just be coming in. It's like trying to manage that, and then also trying to, like, obviously at the time the goalkeeper coach I had was always big on trying to extra load, like trying to get extra reps in, extra kicking, extra crossing. So like I said, I'd be out at like 9:30, and then I'd also be out in the afternoon when all the lads are off, kind of thing. And as much as I'm a big believer in putting in extra work and trying to work on your technique, because as a goalkeeper, I think most of it, I think a lot of it's psychological, but a lot of it you need to work on your technique, especially with goalkeepers need to be good with your feet and stuff these days. I feel also the need to I feel the players should be able to kind of stand up for themselves and say, like, look, like, I'm feeling sore today, I think I should really leave this extra session, without the coach being like, well, how much do you want it, kind of thing. Like I say to a lot of young lads, like, if you're having aches or pains, if you're getting a bit of knee pain and stuff, and then your coach is getting you out in the afternoon to do an extra bit of kicking and stuff like that, like I wish that I kind of stood up for myself a little bit more. Like, when you're a young lad, you want the best, and you want the coach to think like, all right, yeah, this is what he really wants. He wants to put the extra effort in. And I wish I kind of just said, like, no, like, I need to back off, which I got better at, but it kind of took my injuries and stuff to kind of get to that point. Which I think, so, like, being a goalkeeper is, like, a different ball game in terms of you fight your sessions, like I said, for the outfield players, but the goalkeepers, like, they could do anything else. Like, we're out early, we're in late.
No, you're absolutely right.
Crazy. It's crazy. Don't be a goalkeeper. That's a simple thing. But one quick question I want to ask you. I know. One quick question I wanted to ask you. You touched on when you had your ankle injury and you want to work, you focused a little bit on your speed work, because that's a big question I get asked a lot of, like, young footballers, like, how do I get fast? I know I didn't put this in my notes, I just came up with this, but is there any, like, certain things that you would kind of give to a lad who wants to, maybe he needs to work on his speed or wants to kind of get a little bit faster? I know football speed's different to, like you said, 100-meter Usain Bolt speed. What would you want to kind of focus on with a young lad?
I think probably the first one, again, depending on is like technical competency. I think we'll go out and play so many different sports as kids. One of the ones I don't know how much we ever do is get taught to run properly. So, like, if you look at a lot of top level, so take Ronaldo, like, is he technically, would he look like an actual sprint? I know we just said there, don't even like Usain Bolt, but they're the most efficient runners. So should we have some similar mechanics? So that would be the first one I would go to, is like, what is your running style like? Are you efficient? The second one would then be driven off testing. So look at some types of speed tests. Is it acceleration needs to work on? Is it max velocity? And in the gym, it probably more around relative strength. So if you're strong, you can produce more force. So force equals mass times acceleration. So if you maintain your mass or lose a little bit, and you improve how much force you're hiring in, then hopefully acceleration changes. There's some stuff around, like, horizontal dominant exercise, so working more around your glutes and your hamstrings. But I would definitely start with your technical competency, and then have a good program around you that's testing to see where your strengths and weaknesses lie and target them. I think that's what we would approach it at Newcastle anyways.
Yeah, because like I said, I got a lot of young lads kind of want to work that, but a lot of people don't actually think about the technical side of it. They think like, right, I want to go and deadlift more. I want to go and work on like my hamstring, like doing some Nordics or something like that. Like that's what they kind of instantly go to. It's not like, right, we need to strip it back and go on technique, which I've started looking into a little bit more because I've looked back at my run technique and my run technique isn't great. And I want to kind of feel more athletic in terms of working on that sprint and stuff. Because I remember when I was younger, I was quite a good like sprinter, but now I've kind of went into the more like obviously lifting a few more weights and putting on a bit more size. I feel like I've lost that side of it. So it's kind of something that I know that I need to work on. Like I follow people on, there's a good guy on YouTube called Overtime Athletes, Chris Bernard, if you've heard of him. He's based in America. I've been watching his sort of stuff. So working on the technique side of it. And like we mentioned, like go on, what you going to say?
I think the two who I've seen who seem to be quite at the prominent guys is Jonas Dodu. I'll probably just butcher his surname, but he's a sprint coach who does a lot in team sports in the UK. And then Stu McMill from Altus. Dan Paff, actually, they've just had a webinar recently. And they did a couple of presentations on sprint and team sports, which are probably worth people to have a look at. But I think two other things on that is, if it's speed within a game, you've got to think about the decision making. So let's say me and you are in a game and I'm faster than you, but you know what's going to happen. So you've already started to move yourself into the right position. I think there's always a big thing to say, well, if I'm half a second slow on reading the game, but you're more faster than me to then make a difference to that, then, you know what I mean? It doesn't matter how quick you are if you're reading the game better than the other person, I think, to an extent. Yeah. So I think we'll probably get bogged down and just like, oh, I want to get faster and faster. It's like, have you read the game? Are you putting your body in the right position? So one thing I always say to lads is like, when they're stood up, right, like you should always be in that sort of like athletic position, right, to move at all times. So you're always anticipating, which I think probably is an interesting aspect that's probably overlooked. So 100%, I think we talk about like game speed. It is about the game. So what are you reading about the game that's then making you initiate the movement? And if you can do that better than, you know, you talk about it, Paul Scholes had an extra half a yard in his head. I 100% believe in that, and I think that's probably somewhere you need to start as well, depending on your position. Yeah, because the best players play the game better upstairs first, and then everything else comes after.
That's something I felt like I should have focused on, because I was so focused on what I was doing in the gym to kind of physically get myself in the best shape possible for the game, like working on speed, working on power, working on like my body strength and stuff. But I wasn't so much neglecting, but I wasn't concentrating as much on actually like my game thinking. Like I think especially as a goalkeeper, in fact as a footballer in general, I think you have to be working on your mind is probably more important than working on like how strong you are, how quick you are. I think that's something that, and working obviously on your ball skills and stuff, that's probably something that you should prioritize. And then if you've got that, then go and work on, like, if you can obviously be faster, you can be stronger and stuff like that. That's going to be fitter obviously is a big thing for football. That can kind of get you that extra yard kind of thing. But the main thing is probably working on the actual game side of it rather than that, the kind of physical side of it, which is something that I kind of focus too much on. Obviously trying to get bigger and stronger, because that was in my mentality. I pictured the type of goalkeeper I wanted to be. I wanted to be that type of keeper that you go on the pitch and look at him and think, fuck me, he's a big lad, I don't want to go near him. That's what I was like in my head. But really, I should have, like, I that maybe wasn't the type of keeper that I was. I should have been the keeper that was maybe a little bit better with his feet, or maybe had a bit more finesse about him rather than just being this like big beast who doesn't really move. That was just kind of the mentality that I had, and probably should have been more open to other things. So there's probably maybe young lads in that position who might just want to be like, right, I want to be a beast. And, you know, I want to go and smash weights, which you hear it all the time. Like, they want to go and, like, it's great to do an extra, but maybe it's like that old saying, train smart, not hard, rather than
absolutely.
yourself.
I think you've probably hit the nail on the head. Like, what is it you want is the outcome, and then making sure that outcome's right first. So getting advice from different areas, getting different inputs, and then putting a program together that's appropriate and holistic. So making sure that you not spend too much time in the gym, you actually spend more time with performance analysis. Like a good example would be the keepers. It was a pick for it at the World Cup.
Yeah.
Was it had on his water bottle where everyone would die? It's like, you haven't changed anything about Jordan Pickford. All he does is upstairs, he has an idea where they're going to go. So he's better prepared, and then he makes the saves. So it is, I think, probably, you're saying that it's a holistic program. And that's probably one of the big things that's changed for me over the years. Like, we don't work in silos as much. We work more as a multidisciplinary team. And I think if he came back, I think about the keepers probably wouldn't happen as much because we're having them conversations as staff. I think that's something we've all worked really hard on in the last few years to improve.
No, definitely some good points there, to be fair. But last question, because I realise we've been going on for quite a while. And people get bored of podcasts after 45 minutes. People start complaining. But last little thing, we briefly touched on it before the podcast. Just on about injury prevention. Like, you made a great point. I'll let you make the point anyway. But just about injury prevention, kind of what's the best way to, is there any exercises, is there any specific way to kind of manage injury prevention? Obviously, like, there is times where you're going to get halved and you might have a really bad injury, or you might, as a keeper, you might make a save to your right, your finger gets stuck in the ground, and things like that happen. But in terms of like muscle injuries, joint injuries and stuff that you can almost control, what can you do to help it?
I think what we were talking about before was, once you've been injured, that's the biggest issue, because the biggest predictor of injury is previous injury. So if you don't want to be injured, don't get injured in the first place. So
sounds simple.
It does. I wish it was. Yeah. We've went from a mindset of injury prevention to injury reduction, because there's a lot of trainer thought that you can't prevent injuries. So what can you do to reduce them? And a couple of years ago, so John Fitzpatrick and Stevie Weir did an injury audit. It was excellent. They looked at all the most common injuries we had, and then they looked at what the mechanisms of injury were. And then from there, how do we test it? And then how do we improve it? So we ended up with, I think, hamstring was a major injury, ankle sprain, groin and quad, I think, were the 4 main injuries. So when we looked at what the mechanism of injury was, we then developed some programs. So we have an injury reduction program. So the majority of players, or all players from 16s upwards, will do some form of hamstring exercise, usually Nordic curls for the hamstrings. We do reverse Nordic curls for the quads. We do Copenhagen lifts for the groins. And we'll do some calf exercises for the ankle. And we found that they've been fairly easy to implement. The best thing we did was we have a 6-week introduction program. So you've probably done Nordics before, and they're not the most pleasant of exercise. So gradually just easing the players in, because last thing you want to do, right, you're going to do 3 sets of 10, like your hamstrings will be absolutely hanging. So we gradually increase that. By no means are they 4 exercises that we stick to. We change it regularly to different ones, but again, it has to fit into that model of what is the mechanism of injury, and then how do we help try and reduce that likelihood of occurring. So that is our injury reduction program in a nutshell. But it is massively, like we talk about, once you get one injury, it's then leads on to the next one. So we talk about ankles, and it's led to your knees, and then knees will inevitably lend into hip, and then hip into back, and it's a vicious cycle, unfortunately.
I know, it's like, once you get an injury, like I tell lads, because obviously I had a number of injuries myself, like once you get that one injury, your life isn't going to be the same anymore in terms of like football. Like, you're not going to be able to wake up and go outside and just go for a jog and then you're ready to train. Like, it's not. I wish it was like that for me. Like, it's like my warm-ups are like half an hour, at least 45 minutes before I do anything. Just because obviously, especially the more injuries that you get, you've got to rehab. Like for a knee, do some knee activation stuff, quad activation stuff, some stability stuff, glute stuff. Then I've got an ankle, so I do some inversions, some eversions, some balance stuff. Back, some core activation, some side plants, some dead bugs or something like that. And then that's already half an hour. Like, you're never going to be, and then obviously mobility on top of that as well, like focusing on that will help you. But like, once you get that one, especially if it's a serious injury, like, you're going to have to stay on top of it. And even if, like, ACLs is a big one, like, obviously, I think it's, what was it, the first 18 months, there's like a higher percentage if you get re-injured again, and after that, you kind of, I can't remember what it was, because my brother's doing his ACL.
I've seen research saying 2 years after the injury, you've still, well, it takes 2 years to get back to your normal gait pattern. So it might be like a counter movement jump, some aspect of that still hasn't fully restored. Even when you're back playing after a year, you've still got to keep on top of it. that's probably the most dangerous point, is when people get back fit and they're not under the guidance of a physio, like one-to-one anymore. It sometimes starts to slip, and that's what we see with players, and then you've got to get back onto them. So it's that thing again about motivation. If you do unfortunately get an injury, it's keeping on top of it and being consistent with your preparations, because the longer you can keep going without an injury, the better. And that's, I think, probably one of the biggest keys once you've been injured.
Yeah, I always say people once, like, what gets you fit will keep you fit. Like, staying on top of it. Like, you might be fine, you might have a long-term injury for 6 months and you're back. You might have 6 months in the clean, you're fine. But then, like, one day you might, like, for example, your ankle, you might just slightly tweak it and then you're kind of back to square one. But if you stayed on top, if you kept on doing your rehab stuff, your prehab, your balance stuff, whatever, that injury might not have recurred. So just staying on top of little injuries and doing the activation stuff, and like listening to like the likes of yourself, your S&C coaches. Like, I remember when they used to get you, when I first started doing like the banded clams and stuff, the lateral, like the crab walks and stuff, and standing on like a cushion or a Bosu doing like little stupid balance stuff. You think like, oh, this is stupid stuff kind of thing. But things like that are what keep you injured. If you didn't do any of that, you'd probably get injured and then think, God, I wish I would have done them. Like, it's crazy. Like young lads probably don't understand the importance of things like that, which I didn't myself. It takes getting injured to realize it. So if any young lads listening, like just listen to guys like Craig and your coaches, your physios and stuff, and do what they're telling you to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But one little thing, what would you say to any young lad, like one little bit of advice, just to kind of to end off? Young lad, say he's maybe 16, he's just got offered his scholarship at Newcastle United, for example. One little bit of advice for him or her.
Make sure you enjoy it.
Yeah.
Make sure you enjoy it. It's to play football as a job must be an absolute joy. Get the most out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we've got so many departments in the club. Milk them for everything they're worth. Learn everything you can. Have a great experience. It might last 2 years, and that'll be it. Make sure it's the best 2 years of your life. But just enjoy it. You can get really wrapped up in it and worry about every little aspect, but just try and enjoy it. See it as a challenge and really enjoy it.
Yeah, the more you enjoy something, the more you kind of get into that flow state, the better you're going to be as well. Like, there's a lot of pressure as a young lad going into that environment. There is a lot of pressure, and like you are fighting for your job in a sense every day. But if you can get into that mindset that you're going into enjoy it, you're just playing football. You've probably got realistically one of the best jobs in the world. Like, once coming out of football, you realise how good football is once you're in it. And obviously, when you're fit and things are going well, it's great. Obviously, when it's injuries and stuff, it's a little different story. But enjoy it while it lasts, because you never know what could happen. You could go on to the Premier League like some lads have. You could go down different paths, but make the most of it. And then you forgot my 3 questions that I've got. Have you had a look at them in the notes? Did you have a look? Yeah. 3 questions that I've been asking all my guests. So first one is 3 people, past or present, anybody, like celebrity, your gran, I don't know, your mum or dad, whoever you want, invite round for coffee or for dinner.
I'll be honest with you, these are the hardest things you sent over, because I've never thought of this. The first one, I got Mark Billingham down. He's on 2 Days Wins, but I read his autobiography recently. Special forces stuff I find really interesting. I think the stuff they do in terms of going into situations which can be highly volatile and uncertain, to be able to go into that on a regular basis, I find fascinating. And just the fact that they are probably the best prepared at what they do, I think it would be pretty cool to have a sit down chat with him. And some of the stuff he's alluded to, like may or may not have done, would be quite interesting to find out about.
Yeah.
So here'll be the first one, Mark Billingham. The second one's a guy called Ed Catmull. So he's the co-founder of Pixar and he was president of Walt Disney Animations. So I just recently read his book on called Creativity Inc. And the way he ran Pixar and Disney sounds more like how you would run a high performance team. It's phenomenal how he got everybody pulling in the same situation to make great products, and then products were films. And if you think of stuff like Toy Story, how massive they are, and then the recent Disney films are like billions and billions of pounds of making. But the way they've done it, you would want, like, I was reading the thing, I want to be involved in that. So I think talking to somebody like that, he's a master at telling a story or creating a story, and I think that would be pretty cool to chat to. And then somebody actually in a high performance environment, probably Sir Dave Brailsford. He's probably had unparalleled success with British Cycling and Team Sky and Team Ineos. Just how he does it, I would imagine it's never straightforward. Like, success never happens in a straight line, but to have that much success over such a long period of time, it'd be really fascinating to hear how he's done it with so many different people. I think it would be really interesting to have a chat with him.
Spot on, mate. Solid 3 guests. So next one is 3 people you'd want to train with. So this could be football related or gym related.
Yeah. I'll be honest with you, this was the hardest one because I'd never really thought of it before.
Yeah.
I can't run. I like to cycle. So I think the first person would be Chris Froome. Just, it sounds a bit daft, but I like where he goes mentally when he's on a bike. Like, he really suffers. I think going out with him would be an experience not in a good or a bad way, just in an interesting way to see like what an athlete at the very peak does, like how much they push themselves. Like, it's crazy. Another one I was kind of talking about was James Cracknell. Like, another guy who like absolutely pushes himself to the maximum. Like, I'll train on and I'll push myself, but what they do is like next level superhuman stuff. It's crazy. So Chris Froome was my first one. You set with Michael Jordan. I'm sure everybody's just watched the recent series on Netflix. Like, yes, he probably sound like a bit of a tough teammate, but watching him play every day, like, I'm not a massive basketball fan, but I could watch video clips of Michael Jordan playing because what he did just looked absolutely out of this world. So I think being able to train with a guy like that day in, day out would be absolutely phenomenal. And again, I'm sorry, I'm not picking any footballers here. I'm purposely doing
Don't worry, mate.
The last one's Richie McCaw. When I was in school, I was a captain on teams, and Richie McCaw was a captain of the New Zealand All Blacks. And when you watch him, he seemed to be involved in absolutely everything. Like, he led from the front. And I think if you trained with him, you would like to think that would rub off on you. You've been like, you want to be a leader, you want to stand next to him and work with him. So I think Richie McCaw was somebody who I would enjoy training with. Definitely learn from.
Yeah, have you read Legacy, the All Black book?
Yeah, I've read that a few times. It's brilliant, isn't it? Again, another reason why I'd want to do that. No dickheads, I quite like that. It's simple, isn't it?
That's the mentality I think a lot of teams need to look at, especially like modern day footballers. I think obviously with the way football's going and it's a lot more like mainstream social media and stuff, I think a lot of some of them need to go back to that kind of old school mentality. The All Blacks mentality is ridiculous. But last question is one thing that you would say to yourself 5 years ago.
I'll be honest with you, I'm just going to keep it dead simple. Enjoy the things that are most important. I think the last few months, it's probably hit home really hard. And when I sat and I thought back 5 years ago, so in the last 5 years, I've getting married. I've had my first child. Well, my wife gave birth to the first child, not me. But, and then getting these promotions at work and having a job that I really love and enjoy. It's like making sure you spend time actually recognizing it, because I think we can just drift by it and let it go past. It's being mindful in the moment. I think we forget about it. So like going back to them lads at 16 who were getting the 2-year scholars, like, enjoy it. 5 years ago, I wish I could turn around and say, look, these moments that you're going to have, really enjoy them. Don't worry about what's going to come tomorrow, because I'm a bit of a warrior. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about this. Enjoy what you've got right now, because it's probably going to be the best 5 years of my life. So that's definitely what I've gone back and told myself.
No, mate, that's a solid answer. But thanks for having us. Thanks for having me on the podcast. Thanks for coming on the podcast, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure.
I've enjoyed it. It's been a good chat.
No, it's been good catching up and everything, so I've really enjoyed it. But are you big on social media? Do you want to shout out anywhere where people can follow you? I don't know, LinkedIn or anything, if you're on there, or Instagram?
LinkedIn, it's just Craig Musham. Twitter, it's C Musham, just the initial C and then Musham. Instagram, I think it's SNC_Craig, something like that. But if you want to send us a message on LinkedIn, I'll always reply.
I'll find them and stick them on in the show notes anyway, because I should really try and get a LinkedIn. I've got it, but it's just I don't really use it. I'm more Instagram kind of thing. I'm not sure you get into it. But anyway, thank you very much for coming on, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure.
No problem. Appreciate it.